There's a place on Earth where the sun sets in October and doesn't rise again until March, where darkness isn't just the absence of light, but a presence, a weight, a companion that moves into your bones and stays there teaching you things about yourself that you only learn when there's nothing left to distract you from the sound of your own thoughts echoing in the endless black. And the people who live there, in Svalbard, in Barrow, in the northern reaches of Norway and the southern tip of the world, they don't talk about the polar night the way tourists do, with wonder and curiosity about what it must be like. They talk about it the way you talk about grief or insomnia or any other condition that changes you at a cellular level, that rewrites your relationship with time and sanity and the assumption that tomorrow will feel different from today because at least the light will change. Except here the light doesn't change. The darkness just deepens and spreads and becomes the entire universe for months that stretch into what feels like years, where 3 p.m. looks identical to 3 a.m. and your body's circadian rhythm, that ancient biological clock that evolved over millions of years to respond to the cycle of day and night, simply gives up trying to make sense of a world where the rules have been suspended and time has become a flat endless now that neither moves forward nor offers any hope of eventual dawn. You know what it's like when depression makes everything feel gray and heavy, and like you're moving through water when even simple tasks require energy you don't have because something fundamental in you has stopped believing that effort leads to reward, that morning will eventually arrive, that this darkness is temporary and not the permanent condition of your existence. And that's what the polar night does to people who aren't prepared for it. It doesn't just take away the sun, it takes away the structure that sunrise and sunset provide. The markers that tell you when to wake and when to sleep, when to work and when to rest. And without those markers, you're just floating in darkness, wondering if you're tired because it's night or because you've been tired for 3 months straight and you can't remember what rested feels like, can't remember what it's like to wake up naturally to light instead of to an alarm clock that's trying to trick your body into thinking dawn has arrived when actually it's just another increment of the same endless darkness that started in October and won't release its grip until March. You've experienced winters that felt too long, where by February you're desperate for spring, where the short days and early sunsets make you understand seasonal depression in ways you didn't before. But imagine that February feeling starting in November and not ending until April. Imagine darkness so complete that at midday in December, the best you get is a few hours of twilight, a deep blue darkness that's slightly less dark than the black darkness, but never actual light, never the sun clearing the horizon, never that moment when day truly begins, and you can feel your body respond with the kind of biological relief that comes from knowing you're still synchronized with the planet, still part of the natural order, still connected to the rhythms that make humans feel human instead of like creatures lost in space where there are no days. Only the endless void punctuated by artificial lights that fool no one, least of all your body which knows, which remembers, which is waiting for a sun that isn't coming for months and months and months. The Earth tilts on its axis at 23.5 degrees, and that tilt, that slight angle in how our planet spins through space, creates the seasons and determines how much sunlight different parts of the world receive at different times of year. And when you're above the Arctic Circle or below the Antarctic Circle, when you're in those extreme latitudes where the Earth's curvature and tilt combine in ways that seem almost cruel, that tilt means that for part of the year the sun never rises above the horizon. It just circles below the edge of the world, like a promise that refuses to fulfill itself. And the people who live there don't experience winter the way you experience winter. They experience something more primal, more total, more psychologically devastating than you can imagine from your latitude, where even the shortest day still has a sunrise and sunset, where even December offers enough light to remind you that you're still on Earth and not trapped in some cosmic punishment designed specifically to test how long a human can endure darkness before they start to forget what light feels like, what warmth feels like, what hope feels like when hope requires believing that this condition is temporary and not the new permanent reality. The brutal truth that the people of the polar regions know but that nobody warns you about before you experience it is that darkness isn't neutral. It's not just the absence of light, it's a presence that fills the spaces where light should be. It's a weight that presses down on your chest and makes breathing feel like work. It's a fog that settles into your brain and makes thinking feel like wading through mud. And the longer the darkness lasts, the more it changes you. The more your body stops producing serotonin at normal levels, because serotonin production is triggered by sunlight and there is no sunlight. The more your sleep patterns fragment into chaos because your brain can't tell when it's supposed to be asleep and when it's supposed to be awake, the more you start to understand why ancient peoples created myths about the sun being devoured by monsters, why they built temples to pray for its return, why they lit fires and performed rituals because the idea that the sun might not come back, that the darkness might be permanent, was too terrifying to face without some kind of cultural structure that promised this too shall pass, that the light will return, that you just have to survive the darkness a little longer, hold on a little longer, believe a little longer that dawn is coming, even when every fiber of your being has stopped believing in anything except the darkness that has become your entire world. The people who live through the polar night develop strategies that sound simple but require enormous discipline. They use light therapy lamps that simulate sunrise. They maintain strict schedules even when their bodies are screaming that time is meaningless. They gather together because isolation in the darkness is a fast track to madness. They create artificial rituals to mark the passage of time because without the sun there are no natural markers, no shadows that move across the floor telling you that hours have passed and the day is progressing toward evening. And they wait, they endure, they survive by remembering that this has happened before and will happen again, that the darkness is not permanent even though it feels permanent, that somewhere beyond the horizon that sun is still burning and spinning, and eventually the Earth's rotation will bring it back into view, and when it finally does return in late March, when that first sliver of sun appears on the horizon after 6 months of darkness, the people gather to watch it the way you might watch a resurrection. The way you might witness a miracle because that's what it feels like after 6 months of night. It feels like the world is being reborn, like light is not just photons hitting your retina but proof that endings are not permanent, that winter doesn't last forever, that you survived something that felt unsurvivable, and now you get to experience the other extreme, the midnight sun, the 6 months of continuous daylight that will eventually become its own kind of challenge, its own kind of test, because it turns out that too much light is almost as disorienting as too much darkness. But at least with light you can see where you're going. At least with light your body remembers how to feel awake and alive, instead of like a ghost haunting your own life. You can learn something from the polar night without having to experience it yourself, which is that darkness is not death, that absence is not annihilation, that the things we lose, the light that disappears, the people who leave, the hope that fades, they're not gone forever just because we can't see them right now. They're just below the horizon waiting for the earth to turn, waiting for the angle to change, waiting for the moment when conditions align to bring them back into view. And while you're waiting in your own personal darkness, in your own extended night where you can't remember what joy feels like, or what purpose tastes like, or why you used to believe that life was worth the effort of living it, you can remember that the people in Svalbard survive 6 months of darkness by trusting that the sun will return, by maintaining their routines, by gathering with others who understand, by using artificial light when natural light isn't available, by marking time even when time feels meaningless, by holding on to the knowledge that this darkness is a phase, not a permanent condition, and that the very extremity of the darkness is proof that you're in a place where extremes happen, where the pendulum swings hard in both directions, where 6 months of night will be followed by 6 months of day, where the depth of the darkness is matched by the intensity of the light that will eventually, inevitably, impossibly return. The place where night lasts 6 months is not just a geographic location, it's a metaphor for every extended darkness you've endured, every period of your life when the light disappeared and you had to learn how to navigate by feel instead of by sight, how to trust that dawn was coming even when you had no evidence except the stubborn refusal to believe that darkness was your final destination. And maybe what the polar night teaches us is that survival doesn't require light, it requires the memory of light. The faith that light exists even when you can't see it. The willingness to create your own artificial light when natural light isn't available, the courage to gather with others in the darkness, instead of isolating yourself in shame about how much the darkness is affecting you, and the patience to wait through the long night knowing that the earth is still turning, that the sun is still burning, that the angle will change, that the horizon will eventually reveal what's been there all along. Hidden, not because it disappeared, but because you were looking from a place where seeing it was temporarily impossible. And impossible is not the same as permanent darkness, is not the same as death and night. No matter how long it lasts, always ends with the morning you stopped believing would ever come. But that arrives anyway, not because you earned it or deserved it or figured out the secret, but because that's what mornings do. They arrive, eventually, inevitably, in the place where night lasts 6 months and then surrenders to the light.